All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Always nice to have the spiciest panel right after lunch so nobody falls asleep. I'm Sandeep Bakshi. I look after the venture arm for Europe and the US for Prosus. And I'm delighted to introduce my fellow panelists here. George, perhaps you wouldn't mind starting with introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm George, co-founder, CEO of Lorum. We are effectively a global clearing bank. So we help global FIs move money around the world, manage that money, etc.
Hi, everyone. Francesco here, CEO and co-founder of TrueLayer. What we do, we are a payments network that is built on top of open banking technology and account-to-account. We predominantly work and service UK and Europe.
Hi, Zukhela here, Director of Commercial Trading at Eurocard. We're one of the largest licensed stablecoin-based infrastructure and orchestrator across global emerging markets.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donald, and I'm the CTO of BVNK.
So just to get started, I think, and also perhaps if you wouldn't mind in your responses, just giving the audience a sense of the size of your organizations, either through FTE, however best you want to quantify it. I think the lady who was introducing us kind of put you on the spot there, Don, where it sounds like AI is being adopted across BVNK. Would love to perhaps just contextualize what are some of the areas where you have deployed AI and where have you already seen it pay back?
I would say the easier way to answer this question is like where it's not deployed at the moment. We're using it quite extensively, and part of that kind of rollout has been also to not just say, here you go, everyone go use AI, but it's also to actually like measure the usages and kind of get that feedback from our team and like see what they're actually using it for. There's some, I think, let's say the coding, like engineering productivity stuff is quite well documented. Obviously, recent market panics have sent that message quite clearly. But from our side of things, that's not part of it, but we're also kind of embedding it into certain types of products. So I'd say the place where we've seen the most kind of outcome from it is in our kind of compliance areas where we're dealing with a lot of like unstructured information, a lot of language, a lot of text, lots of different languages, different regions, etc. So yeah, that's the biggest one.
Leica?
So we're also using it across the board from engineering, marketing, HR, legal, compliance. But I think what's been the most interesting for us is where we're using it to curb emerging market infrastructure gaps. So for example, in our space, PSPs aren't always plug and play. We're lucky if banks have APIs or clean APIs for us to integrate into. So we've built AI agents to help us integrate with our partners faster and to monitor our liquidity with the banks.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to not repeat because by and large, I think like clearly AI is impacting like a lot of different business processes. What I really find interesting generally is how the adoption is happening more than like where necessarily, because it's very much bottom up. We tried at times to say, oh, that's the tool, you're going to use that, whatever, it just makes perfect sense. And then inevitably, there is another thing that just pop and goes like, catches wildfire of sort, right? And so that has been very interesting to see, this sort of like almost disorganized adoption. And then it has been like the most sticky adoption of tools, like very, very much like bottom up. What I observe is that irrespective of where is the calculation in terms of like productivity gains, like a team that today is a team of 5 or 10, and then like you chat with like the head of that team and like tells you, yeah, probably 6 months I can run the team with 2 person if I want, or I can serve like 3-4 times the volumes without necessarily having to hire more, right? But beyond this sort of like calculation, I just see the almost like call it like the average really intelligence of like the company is raising. Like it's just like the final product in any department, right? Is just higher. Like code is better, it's documented, unit test, integration test, like everything is more thorough, more think it through. It's just like it feels much more of a final product from to get to go, versus before it was very much like the like the 80-20, right? Sort of calculation, very much like startup approach. So that to me, in a way, like this sort of like raising the average IQ of the company, I think to me is like maybe the most impactful thing that I notice right now.
I think to echo what Faraz saying, actually, I think what it did for us was it like removed any excuse for anyone to move remotely slowly in our business. Like to not have maximum context on any given topic. AI has been very, very useful for us. I mean, last year we grew 55 times in a year, and we couldn't have done that without AI. We had to implement a lot of AI across our business, not only just in like our own understanding of how we did things, but also to scale process that we just didn't have enough people to scale that with. Like we did a lot of that growth with 15 people. We're now lucky to be 50, but we can operate a business much bigger than your average 50-person business because of that. The one place I'd say we didn't see a huge gain was actually in engineering. That was the one place where we didn't see like a lot of clean gain, and it was actually much more of a mission to push engineers to leverage AI in the more complex parts of our business. But we've launched products based off of AI agent trading, et cetera, and in the FX space. Like Don mentioned, we spend a lot of time on compliance AI, so whether it be from like transaction monitoring through to onboarding, where there's just a lot of, as you say, unstructured kind of language involved, and to be able to onboard that kind of sheer number of businesses in with a small team, we just couldn't do it without AI really. But I mean, for me, I use it really to push people with more unrealistic timelines, and they can't really achieve things without the AI, to be honest. So it's had a big impact for us.
So actually, so just building on what you said, could you share an anecdote? Because intuitively, I would imagine that engineers would be like, oh, I want to try and make my job quicker, easier. So one, how did you find out, and perhaps if you could share an anecdote, I don't know if there's a particular project, but how did you find out that there was a tool, actually, because given the remit that you have as the founder of the business, it's presumably not as easy for you to kind of have a lens into what everybody's doing. And then how did you then push people for more complex adoption?
I think from my own involvement, I'm very involved in kind of every part of the business. I'm like very good at flying in and flying out of a problem. And when I can then achieve a result faster than the person that is actually responsible for doing that, I can put a lot of pressure on to change that. I think on the engineering front, it was interesting because AI just wasn't good at the kind of complex ledgering parts of our business. It was very good at kind of a thin top layer, but we didn't get a lot of gain from kind of trusting AI to go out and build like really complex parts of our system. And we found that engineers would actually sometimes over-index in AI and not understand what they're deploying. And we had to start kind of treating AI more as like a junior engineer on our team, where you're going to intensely review the code that it writes. You need to really understand what it's doing. It's not as simple as like, in the future, we're going to have 5 really high context engineers and then thousands of engineering agents. And for us, I think like integrity is everything in our ledgering and everything like that. And so just allowing that to run free wasn't going to be a reality. But for instance, from a regulatory application perspective, it's been phenomenal in helping us. Like we did 6 new licenses in 1 year because we could just massively leverage AI to allow one person to manage 6 regulatory applications in one go. And it's amazing how much context that AI will pick up on the way we talk to regulators. And how does that vary from a US banking regulator to a Dubai-based payments regulator, et cetera. And so we found it really, really powerful for expanding our kind of parallel tracking globally. And I think it's made it unreasonable to expect to expand one market by one by one.
Fair. That was a great anecdote. Don, building on something that you mentioned, you said that it might be interesting for us to ask, where are you not using AI, right? So I would ask you, where's one thing that somebody's brought to you, be like, hey, we want to use AI here, and you're like, hold on, we're a financial services company. We can't do that. Is there an anecdote that comes to mind?
Yeah, there is. So it's something we're busy like looking at now. So obviously you can talk about all these kind of IC-related kind of outputs. You can produce content faster, you can write code faster, legal documents and so forth. But the kind of management layer is still kind of, in our business at least, largely untouched. So like kind of all of that kind of management is still kind of orchestrated by people. And and I don't think it means we want to not have people. We just want to empower them to like kind of get rid of the kind of grunt work of like, updating your kind of whatever, your quarterly planning or your quarterly projects and bring it into that layer. It's a lot more difficult because there's a lot of kind of multiple systems, that it touches. It's not just like code, which is easily verifiable. It's like you need to be in your communication channels, your email, your drive, and like doing that like securely is like very difficult. But it's also like a major like unlock. So that's something that we're still trying to get right.
Okay. And Fran, building on something that you mentioned, you said that there are colleagues of yours that are like, hey, look, we could do with perhaps a smaller team, or if your board was to come to you, or if you were to basically go to your CFO and be like, hey, we need to cut headcount, vendor spend, or ship something faster, what do you think today, either anecdotally, like could you do with AI?
Yeah, look, so first of all, like, I think I try to refrain quite a lot into thinking AI equals to be a money saver by default, right? So I don't see that necessarily happening right now. But clearly there is at some point is sort of like a economic equilibrium where like you have supply and demand, right? And so if you believe you're in a world where you are capped on your ability to supply, so you have sort of like 3 times more demand, then clearly by growing more efficiently on your production of supply will just like increase your output, right? And so I think by and large, certain companies at different times in different areas, they will have to run this calculation of, can I supply more and find a new equilibrium that is much higher in the output, or actually not? Actually, I don't have this source of like elasticity of demand, so I'm over, like at some point I have overcapacity and I need to reduce cost. And I think that will be by and large true for entire businesses, especially when I think about, how do you scale a business, especially in payments where we are, like you most often go into either 2 directions. Either geographical expansion or you go vertical, like value-added service is what you build on top, right? And so you have a lot to build. And the more you build, the more like you get sticky, whatever, right? So at some point, as an organization, you need to decide, can I expand as fast as like, I have this extra supply of bits, basically, that I can create? And if the answer is yes, it's probably like you have to. And your like scaling function is going to be sort of like toward cost is going to go much slower than what it used to be before, right? The reverse is also true. I don't think that we are there yet. At least certainly at TrueLayer, I don't know, probably also as an industry, there yet to say, I can confidently run this equation in every single department and say, I can certainly do this thing with either less people or I have this excess demand that I can feel, right? But we are getting there. And especially in product and engineering, I think that has been a slow burner for the last 2 or 3 years with a lot of FOMO, like, you go on Twitter, everybody are like, oh my God, like I'm running entire businesses with like half of a person, like, really, okay. But in reality, it wasn't like that, right? Like a lot of pushback, a lot of like, I think engineers are sort of like, they grew up in a world where they are artists in their own respect, right? Artisan, right? Like they sell the thing. And now we are moving into a little bit more of a software factory sort of model, right? And I think around December, November of last year, there has been sort of a quantum leap in model capabilities. And all of a sudden now it was like, okay, like we just have to do this. And everybody sort of adopted pretty naturally. I think that the world is going to be split into categories of engineers that will still think about themselves as the artist, and the ones who are going to enjoy actually being much more leveled up at the solving the problem space, more like the single task execution.
I'm going to do a plug for Slido because people are already asking questions. So if you have questions, please put them in here. I'm going to actually go to one of these questions because I think that they're interesting as Leica, but perhaps if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. There's so many tools out there. And how do you especially for organizations of your nature, how do you encourage usage, adoption within some sort of controlled sandbox so you're not breaking processes? And how do you encourage teams to bring tools and try and test them out?
Yeah, 100%. So we had a team meeting a couple of months ago, and our CEO was encouraging us, I want to see more departments using AI. And I think, thinking about also what Don said, what we haven't started doing is measuring that. So we've got all these different departments, utilizing AI in different ways. And, certain departments can use it in a more structured way because it's easier, like regulatory versus compliance is a little bit more complicated. Trading is a whole other dynamic, especially in emerging markets. So I think we should be quick to encourage experimentation, but when it comes to actual production, we should always encourage caution, especially in our field.
Yeah, I think I can talk about like how we do it, but because it's moving so fast, I think because maybe just a bit of context setting, like 2 years ago, obviously things were heating up, and internally we were like, okay, this is a thing. We need to kind of pay attention. So we spun up an internal kind of AI engineering team, is effectively just focusing on like horizon scanning and kind of prototyping, things like that, to help us kind of stay on top of things. And what we noticed originally was just like, I don't know, every week or month or something, there was some new tool set that was coming out. And the engineers, certain engineers would like really want to use these tools and all that kind of stuff, but it's obviously not really practical to change your workflow every week or every month or something like that. So we kind of worked on like a quarterly operational cadence where like this quarter we're using Claude Code or Cursor, and like, next quarter we'll review what's happening. Obviously you can move with the models, but you can't just like it's not like a free-for-all, because also, there's data integrity, data protection kind of thing. So you have to kind of supply the guardrails. So we're on like kind of a quarterly cadence now, and we have internal infrastructure, which kind of allows people to maybe go a little bit further than, we don't like allow people to just go straight to like the OpenAI APIs, for example. We have like an internal gateway which kind of does the guardrails, PII protection, all these kinds of things. So, that kind of governance actually allows us to like experiment a bit faster, but I'd say we're into like a pretty good like quarterly change, let's say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think for us, like the word pragmatism is the most important with this. Like it's not all or nothing. Like not everything works for everything, and trying to also handle not going all in is also important. Like these tools change so quickly, the models change so quickly. I think you can't be kind of stuck down to one thing, but you also can't chase everything. And for us, that pragmatism has been important. Like, okay, maybe we're not going to let it go and write some core piece of code, but we are going to leverage it for a different process. And we're a little bit more informal because we're smaller, like we're 50 people, not 500 people. So we don't have to have such a procurement and gating process, but it can kind of run away with you as well. So like, I think being pragmatic about it is always super important, whether that's in like convincing someone to look at something or convincing them not to, really.
That goes to another good question that's over here that I'll call to, which is: have you ever deployed a tool or some piece of AI that was just fundamentally worse than the existing rules-based process that you had?
I think for us, no, because we're very lucky. Like we're very greenfield, right? The business has existed for 3 years.
Yeah.
So like most of what we see is brand new, and AI is actually really quick at synthesizing that. I think when you've run a business for 10 years and you've got all these existing processes, that of course it's going to be worse. But for us, everything is relatively brand new.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to look at things like in time, because like we started experimenting with AI maybe 2.5 years ago or something like that, right? And so when we started, it was quite crap, and I was like, hey, like this is magic, we should like use that, and then like inevitably 3 weeks later, like, oh, we ran a test, like whatever, and it doesn't work. Okay, and so we went on with that pattern for quite some time, like, I don't know, customer support being a major one where we had to wait a couple of things happening. One, model capabilities becoming just simply better. But the other more like, I think it's very important, like how do you bring the context inside of the model? That sort of like context pipeline, I don't know how to call it, right? Like finding all the relevant data that then you feed to the model to get an answer. That has been more of the job than the model itself, right? And that took a little bit of time to just like go and grab all the different pieces. So that evolved over time. The other example, for instance, is in sort of treasury reconciliation. We run, like, our setup is that we have at the moment, tens of different, call it like bank accounts, if you want, like pool capital that we use to do settlement in different geographies and different use cases, right? And so the reconciliation of that, like, it takes time and whatever, and sometimes it was manual for certain cases. And so we had to run a lot of tests up until all of a sudden it converged and it did like the job perfectly. But it took like maybe 1 year of like every 3 months we try and it doesn't work, and then eventually all of a sudden it works, right? So I think that time is really important aspect that you can almost like bank on the fact that something doesn't work today doesn't mean it will not work tomorrow, and just have that mental elasticity to wait for the thing.
I guess, sorry, did you have something to add?
No, I want to just say, like, the people, you need to be selective about what you use it for. If you just think like using AI for some process that is better suited to like some deterministic system, like, you're probably going to have a bad time. And even when you roll out these AI systems into like a production environment, they aren't perfect. But like, what is your threshold for perfection, and like, how do you evaluate and measure those things? So that's why I think if anyone wants to kind of go down this path, it's important to like actually have the infrastructure like in place. So let's say you're rolling out some kind of AI tooling inside of your system to, I don't know, extract data or perform some task or something. It's important to have like the evaluation mechanism so that post you can actually monitor, okay, actually this is performing at 99% or whatever threshold that I'm happy with. And then as these models change, because it's not like they bring out the new Claude or the new Gemini model and they keep the old one forever. Those models move away. So when you move to the new Claude, like, people are used to writing unit tests or integration tests, but now how do I test my prompts and my models that like are going to give me the same results that I want? Because maybe between models, let's say you had whatever, Claude 4.5 and you're getting a 99% success rate, but on Claude 4.6, which is a better model, but because of the prompt structuring, you're only getting a 90% success rate. So it's really important to like not just like write some prompt and send it to an API, but you need to like evaluate and monitor these things like as you upgrade. So I think we've been lucky to avoid like any serious things, but you have seen, whether it's leaders or whatever say like, oh, we should just use AI to solve this problem, but those are better solved by like deterministic systems. So I think it's important for people to think about where to use it properly.
I think those inconsistencies also are why it's actually a really dangerous track to measure AI adoption inside your business. Like, I think it's the wrong incentive for your teams. Just if you're measuring it, you're just pushing them to just use it at all costs. And actually, that's not the right way to do that. I think until those inconsistencies are flattened, I think it can completely drive the wrong outcome to be measuring AI adoption.
You should use like outcomes measurements, like what you would normally use. But then, if your outcomes are bad and you're not using AI, that's like kind of like a temperature check on, like, okay, maybe something else is wrong.
I guess it's clear that technology has made leaps and bounds improvement over the past few years and will continue to do so. Today, does anybody have any feedback about a pitch that came through your door, or somebody suggested something and you're like, this is just not possible. This is total BS.
I can maybe comment on a little bit, but I do think there's obviously a ton of hype, right? And obviously, having gone on this journey like quite deep into AI and like, let's say like the low-level AI, and like what are some of the things that I think if it was like, I don't know, Anthropic or OpenAI proposing this idea, I would say, okay, maybe they've got some secret sauce. But if it's like let's say an external like non-frontier kind of organization, having the kind of awareness of like what the limitations of the models are and like what they can and can't do, and like, so there's a lot of these kind of, let's say, knowledge startups which are effectively like RAG solutions for your business, that they kind of, it's quite like well documented that these businesses like fall off a cliff like when you get to a certain size. So I think there's a lot of hype around that, and I'm sure Demis, Salvis, and these guys are like working on some like crazy solution to like actually teach the models, really teach them, not just provide them with context. But I think there's a lot of space, a lot of startups in that space that maybe overselling.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, from a trading point of view, where it's hype is price prediction, especially in our markets. There's so many policy shocks, things are changing all the time. So when I talk to my traders, about how we could potentially utilize AI, I'm thinking more from a liquidity, managing, even predicting bank downtime. That's a massive impact on us. For example, every Friday, end of the month, you cannot send out a payment in ZOF and ZAF. Naira goes down during this. And we've got enough, we've got years and years of transactional proprietary data that can help us to build, really good models to give us that data. So I think that's where, as a business, from a trading point of view, where we're looking at it, liquidity forecasting, capital allocation. We're in over 20 markets. So, when am I putting my money? Where am I putting it? Am I keeping more in Nigeria? Am I putting more in Cameroon? Am I moving it, am I keeping more in dollars, euros, etc.? So yeah, that's where I'm thinking we're going to get the most benefit from a trading point of view.
Okay.
I think to counter actually that trading narrative a little bit, we actually found great success of OTC agentic trading, actually, and we've moved billions of dollars through that now. Where actually the fundamental job of a human is a coordinator in that. And an agent can do that coordination really well, like go and rate source across multiple venues, choose a venue to execute on. I agree on like price prediction, it's useless for. But when you're OTC trading like a G20 currency through this, it can be super effective.
Yeah, but ours is emerging markets. I'll talk to you afterwards. I'm keen to hear.
We were having a conversation earlier, a group of us, about, in the world of vibe coding, you can spin up new businesses left, right, and center. I'd be curious for your perspective, long term, what do you think are fundamentally the moats for your business? Is it data? Is it compliance, regulatory relationships, go to market?
Well, yeah, I think for us, luckily we've got Phil here. Compliance and reg is like a huge moat. And obviously we're in, I wouldn't say like a super niche anymore, but like being, having all the learnings of crypto and the various blockchains, that's not something that's like super public, let's say. Not people are super experienced with that kind of thing. But like, I think businesses that are pure software, without any kind of, distribution moat or reg moat or anything, will probably have a very, very competitive time ahead of them. So for us, I think like we're quite well placed, but I'm also kind of, quite AI pulled, as I say, like the future is very difficult to predict.
Yeah, very similarly, where I believe fundamentally AI, at least today, is having like a very hard time to replace humans is like in the human-to-human relationship, right? And when that materializes is relationship, with the enterprise merchants, with the regulator, relationship with the end consumer, the set of preferences. And so in that sense, like is a data moat that you go and start building, right? I tend to believe that, if you spend, 18 months try to do a partnership with a specific bank in a region and all of that, right? Like it's very hard that an AI will either fast track that process for you in any significant manner. Yes, probably it's going to be, writing documents a little bit faster, but fundamentally you need to navigate, have that sort of relationship and so forth, and all of that compounds. So in fact, like, the recent way of how I'm trying to push the thinking process at TrueLayer is let's over-index for that. Like we are living in a world where having, call it like more licenses, more sort of banks, more relationship, more of like the heavy stuff, the heavy lifting is going to have more value than actually even before, because everything else gets deflated away. So we are trying to over-index for that. That doesn't mean yet that you are going to go and replace like the whole mechanics of like how money moves and all of that. It's pretty complex, but certainly over time, like I think that complexity, I would say like the quantum of investment to reach like future parity, it's going to diminish, right?
I think the licensing moat as well only goes a certain length. Like I think it depends on the license, like the quality of the license. Like a Canadian MSB is never going to be a moat. They're like handed out like candy, but a banking license is, right? And so like there's different varying levels. Like these regulators regulating new banks aren't going to regulate hundreds and hundreds of new banks, but Canada will regulate 200,000 MSBs in one go. And so I think you have to really focus on quality licensing as the moat. And I think the same is true of distribution. Like, unless you have some unique edge to distribution, AI is going to be really good at distributing your product as well. Like, with growth marketing, with kind of automated outreach. Like, I think actually, like, the value of an SDR goes away over time. And like these companies, like, we're yet to really see a $100 billion business that doesn't have thousands of salespeople. But and I think that will remain relatively true. But I think we won't see tens of thousands of SDRs in those businesses anymore.
I think that kind of builds on a topic that you opened up, George, which is on agents, right? I mean, you talked about what agents are able to do for you today. Would love to hear actually from other folks. How are you experiencing or experimenting with kind of agents? What would you allow them to do? Where do you think that they're, what are they not able to do so far? I know George talked about trading, but others, do you have comments?
So we have a number of compliance agents, but I'll be very cautious to say that they don't make decisions. They just do reasoning and research. That's for any regulators listening. But so we're doing a lot of that kind of stuff, which does a lot of discovery around customers of ours. So, I know that, obviously you can use Gemini or one of these for doing deep research, but there's a little bit more to it than that. Like, you can do the deep research elements, but you also need to do, let's say, corporate registrar checking, adverse media, browsing their websites, looking, whatever, doing all this kind of stuff. So all of those kinds of things we're using agents for. And then I'd say more on like the experimental side of things, we're using agents for, as I kind of alluded to earlier, we're trying to plug this gap of management. So we've got a few like agents running inside of some of our comms tools to help us.
Yeah, we have been experimenting a little bit with agentic commerce, like try to make our payment rails compatible with what could be the future of commerce. There are like very small scale sample with specific merchants. Like we've done a sort of a pilot with a pizza delivery app and Google. So integrating their agentic protocol and then linking that app with one of those voice devices, and so you just order the pizza and everything happens behind the scene, right? Which in itself, like, it's not like the most incredible thing that you can expect from AI, but of course, like, is a bigger topic of what happens when an agent is going to do shopping for me, like how they enable like money to flow pretty freely. What I'm hearing from merchants, though, is that it's less a question about like payments right now. It's much more of a question of advertising. I think like the phenomenon that they are seeing is much more on share of traffic coming from Google is coming down, and share of traffic coming from OpenAI and other LLMs is going up, right? And so I think like the discovery phase is getting completely reshaped. So my money is much more on the advertising model. I think is going to come before fixing payment. That's my bet. That doesn't mean that we are not very excited on the payment opportunity, but I think that the industry as a whole needs to tackle more like what are like the economic incentive to qualify a consumer to an e-commerce provider of a certain good and service, and how the money flows between those parties. And I don't believe that is understood very well yet. And what are like the byproducts of that? I think like long tail discovery is probably gonna have a huge benefit out of it. Like right now you will go on large marketplaces to tap into long tail. Maybe not in the future. Maybe actually the discovery engine is going to completely move into the LLM. I'm not sure yet, but that's kind of the direction where I'm looking at.
I just want to add something to that. Yeah, I would agree with you on that one, because they can already pay. So there's obviously quite well documented, like virtual cards, obviously stablecoin wallets is a big thing for agents, but they can already pay. Like I said, in our research, we've already like made payments, purchased things online, just using stablecoins or virtual cards. So this is not actually where the problem lies. The problem is, as you rightly say, discovery and trust, and how do you know who's paying, that kind of stuff. That's where the real challenge is.
Yeah, interesting. It's something that we debate quite a lot internally when we're thinking about kind of advertising. The question becomes, well, in the end, who are you advertising to? Are you advertising to just like some consumer agent that's actually going out with some preset criteria? So it is definitely very much an emerging space. There's a bit of a philosophical question here in the Slido that somebody might have some perspective on, where it seems like AI is a really valuable tool for senior engineers or senior folks in the organization. How do you think about the future of cultivating junior talent, where ultimately it is the easy, at least today, some of the less complex tasks, to perhaps use some of the words that George was using earlier, are the ones that people are more naturally adopting for. How do you think about the future of developing junior talent through your organizations?
I'll try to answer, but I think it's very tough. Like the honest answer is that we don't know. Like I'm trying to tell you what I think. I think that you're not gonna be able to replace. Like there are two aspects of like being junior. Is junior as in like you know what's new in the world, and you have like different lenses to understand what's happening, right? And then there is junior as in like your cheap labor force that can work with a senior to do the stuff that the senior doesn't want to do, right? I think like this latter is certainly gonna go and fall away. So maybe that leads into less of an army of like junior everything that works with seniors and that sort of thing. But the former, I think, is super important. I was chatting with somebody here saying like, I want to be mentored by somebody that is 20 years younger than me. Like not the reverse, because that's the only way I can keep myself relevant. And so if you just like scale that at an organizational level, I think that those sorts of like, academy program of corporates are going to become more valuable, more exclusive, more like maybe the source of like the college degree of the world, because they're going to be, clearly you're going to be less of those, but once you're in, I think you're going to have a much more of a critical impact into the organization you're operating to. That's as much as I'm thinking right now, but I mean, I think is a very shifting word.
I'll just say I don't have a good answer for that question, unfortunately, because it is something that we haven't hired, like let's say junior or mid-level engineers for a long time now. So yeah, it's a tough situation to try and figure it out.
I think the archetype of junior changes. Like I think the really driven junior is just empowered by AI and can accelerate through their career much, much faster. I think the more lazy style, like the kind of vest and rest, like they're going to wait around and try and learn from others, that's not going to survive. And I don't see, for us anyway, I don't see AI necessarily replacing people. I see it increasing the capacity of people, and the juniors that are very driven will do well in that, and the people that can't increase their capacity will just be clear losers in the race. And so I think that the people that don't put effort in will struggle because of AI, but actually the really driven and ambitious junior people will do as well as they do today.
Yeah, and perhaps the responsibility on us as senior members of the org is to, make sure junior people coming in are aware of that, aware of how AI can both help them and impact them, and just make sure they're ready. And as Joe said, whoever survives, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think so. Maybe just last point on that was just like I do, obviously a lot of questions on like what's the future of software and whatever. There's obviously the SaaS apocalypse thing happening, but like I do feel like there's still like unlimited demand for software. That's my take at least. I'm pretty sure you can ask every entrepreneur in the room like, are you guys finished building stuff now? Are you no more software? And it's like the answer will always be no. There's always something else to build, and every business will have their own little optimization or workflow or whatever. So it'll be like unlimited demand for that kind of software. I think it's just where those people end up. Like, will a junior engineer end up working at BVNK, or will they end up working for a plumbing company that now insources all of their software and workflow systems? I don't know. It's a different world.
How do you think that the evolution, building on that software point, how do you think the evolution of pricing will change? We're seeing, we find companies that have flip-flopped between seat-based, usage-based, consumption-based, outcome-based. Like, how do you, even when you're thinking about what tools that you want to be using, and goes back to kind of the ROI question as well, how do you think the there will, like, what do you think that the evolution of pricing will be for some of these tools?
Yeah, again, it's like maybe a contrarian take. Everyone assumes there's going to be fewer employees and fewer this, and I don't really believe that's going to be the case. Maybe there'll be a small kind of whatever reduction, but there's also going to be like an army of agents, and I'm not going to give an agent like access directly to my inbox. Like they're going to have their own account, you know, Donald's assistant or whatever on Gmail and Slack and all these other things. Those companies will have to kind of come up with pricing models to support this kind of new way of working. Obviously, they can't charge my agent full price for a seat. So I don't think it's going to be as detrimental to those kind of core SaaS businesses. And then I think for the newer, because there's a lot of skepticism around AI and like charging, because you know, let's just say you're in a kind of support business and you charge per message or interaction or something. I think that kind of billing model is not going to be very good because your agent's going to generate a lot more text and a lot more content, a lot more messages. People will engage with, you know, you can see with support, like the better the support is, the more engagement you get. So it's like, it's a negative incentive. So I think those kinds of businesses will have to be outcomes based. It's like, you know, previously, whatever, you'll have some model and they'll say, we'll charge you $1 per support ticket that we solve for you. That's the billing model. So I think it'll evolve, you know, like that.
Are your customers asking about what tools you're using? Are your customers asking for more AI features, or are they just asking for outcomes or better products and services? Like how much are your customers forcing you to be, you know, ahead of the curve versus you yourself are trying to predict what's going to come down the pipe?
For us, we're pure infrastructure, so we don't really see any demand for agentic functionality or AI. They just care about us doing the job well.
Yeah.
Our regulators care very much about what we use. We've seen actually a lot of fear in regulators about this area, but with customers, like I don't think like speaking to us about thousands of payments over an LLM is not a priority for our customers generally. I find it's a little bit gimmicky for what they're actually looking for with us. That's
very similar. Like I think that in e-commerce space, you start seeing you know, some are part of their business, especially from strategy. Like we want to understand agentic commerce whatsoever, but they are still like small scale pilots or whatever, right? The important stuff is like, are you reliable? What is your price point? Can you serve those, you know, use cases, those geographies? So I think our you know, what is driving us is to serve those customers, like increase the surface of our infrastructure. So everything that goes into that vein, it's a net positive for us, like accelerating speed to that. Clearly, we are highly regulated. I mean, we process more than 100 billion worth of TPV in dollars. So, I mean, you're not going to change things like very lightly. Like you're dealing with kryptonite. Like you need to be very careful about what you do. But nonetheless, like the velocity is increasing, is going to increase. So that for me is everything that I'm looking for at the moment, right?
Yeah, so we've been trying to move, you know, emerging market OTC desks are still very prevalent on WhatsApp groups and obviously difficult to scale. So we've been trying to move our clients over to our treasury portal. And I was chatting to a client, you know, just brainstorming, you know, what would make you want to use this? And they were talking about, you know, Gemini and Google Sheets. Like if they have a table, they can just ask Gemini, oh, you know, what was my sales for the month? Or so I was thinking, brainstorming with the client, and they were saying, you know, can I ask, you know, how much did I do in Nigeria in this month? Or, you know, what was my balance at this time? So yeah, that's something I did relay to the engineering team. That would be quite cool. As you make customers want to use the portal and make it easier for them.
Yeah, I think like it's very, very early in like agentic payments, and I think you can see all these kind of startups popping up about, you know, controls and things like that. But I think it's like it's very early. There's like these protocols emerging and these kinds of things. For me, that's just like, I don't know, trying to build on the hype or on the FOMO, because on one hand you're saying like there's going to be, you know, super intelligence, AGI. But on the other hand, you're telling me it won't be able to open a browser and like fill out a form to buy something. So like, you know, those two things like don't go together. So I think there's a lot of like noise out there, but the merchants are definitely interested. Like they, you know, I think everyone who's used these tools enough knows like this is how you're gonna, you know, maybe for like big ticket things, you might not purchase it, but for like your your groceries, your medications, or like anything like that, it's a no-brainer to like see that going to agentic commerce. But it's going to just take a little bit longer than, let's say, the West Coast guys are predicting.
You opened the door to it, so I'm going to ask, what are those conversations with your regulators like? Like, and how do you allay some of the fears that they may have? And I guess it's an open question to everybody, but yeah.
I think regulators like structure and process, right? Like they like a lot of, especially in more emerging markets where our original licenses were from, regulators really have extracted regulation from more established markets. So like in Dubai, we found in the DIFC that they really had extracted asset management regulation and pulled that in and basically called it e-money. And so they're kind of built on these processes of like who downloads this report at what time, and it's like the emphasis is on like the downloading of the report for the governance, not on the generation of that report. And I think they really struggle to de-link like the act of, say, reconciliation with the reporting of reconciliation, which are actually fundamentally two different things. And it was really interesting in Dubai specifically for that versus other jurisdictions where we're licensed across Asia, across Europe, where they really understand this, is that actually we're going to reconcile in real time at all times, every single transaction, every second. We're not going to wait till the end of the day, run a rec and export it. But that made them so uncomfortable because they think, well, who's responsible for this reconciliation? And it was an education journey really with them. But then it made us have like fantastically successful audits with them because the integrity of what we're doing was so much higher. And I think that wins them round eventually. But in the Middle East specifically, we found the least understanding of the regulations that they had made across various different regulators versus like discussions in the US where it's actually really, really well understood, or in Switzerland, etc. And so it really depends on the regulator. But in Dubai in particular, it was slightly archaic, even though these regulations are effectively brand new.
Yeah, I mean, I echo pretty much what George said. Like, I think like the regulator cares about eventually who has the ultimate responsibility for specific processes that has been put in place. And so, yes, you can use some automation, but as long as you stick into the process that they already expect and somebody's taking the blame, or you can say, this is the ultimate owner of that process, they are going to be happy. The moment that you're saying, like, I don't need that process anymore, or something changes, you're going to have problems. But I think that's at the level of prudential regulation, right? Like, whether it's the FCA, whatever you. I'm sitting very often now in more like conversation at Treasury, at least in the UK. No? In the UK, FCA reports into Treasury. Treasury has a different mandate, which is pro-growth, the economy as a whole, and what have you. And I find that, I mean, they are sort of like pulled in so many different directions. Because one day they need to build a data center, but the next day they need to save jobs. And then the other day there is a whatever ethical issue on something else, right? But also we want to be absolutely like pro AI, but also we want to regulate AI. Like I think like in a room, in a discussion, in closed door, you find so many conflicting sort of like sentiments, and no one so far that I've seen like has been capable of like just reconciling everything in a discourse. Because I think the amount of change, like the rate of change that is happening, is so much so that it's just creating problems left and right. And if it's not a problem today, looks like a problem tomorrow. And so we are in this world of ambiguity. And I think that governments, in that sense, are very well suited to operate in a highly ambiguous sort of world, right? Like they like steady. They like, we have seen the past, we can predict the future. But this is not a future that is very easy to predict looking at the past, right?
Yeah, I think, African regulators, what we've seen, they care about the consumers at the end of the day. So whatever you're doing, they want to know that the consumers are protected. And so, again, as Don was saying, we're not having AI going out and doing things for us. We're rather using it to make ourselves more efficient. So we're not using it to bypass compliance. We're using it to make compliance more efficient and help them in their decisions. I think when it comes to that stage, if it ever comes to that stage where, we're having AI make decisions, execute the decisions, I think that's going to be a tougher conversation.
Yeah, I think we're in our technology bubble, and outside of that bubble, there's not as much adoption in the AI. So it's, again, I think on one of the previous panels was talking about education, on stablecoins, AI, etc. Like regulators, everyone, they're going to need to catch up.
I think we've got time for about one question, so I'm just going to ask each one of you, if all of the technological innovation, all the AI tools that have come over the past 3 years, if they all disappeared tomorrow, what would break in your business?
Onboarding, I can say that confidently.
Same for us, very much onboarding.
Yeah, I would say probably break right now is more like on the customer support side, where like we heavily rely on that now as a business product, at least like certain escalation of that. The rest, I would say, I think everybody will feel like, oh my God, like I'm missing like, it's like taking maybe Excel away, right? Like, yeah, not great, but probably you can still do things, right?
Probably nothing from our side. I think, from an onboarding, yes, we are, utilizing AI to assist us, but we've been operating for so long, and every market is so unique, and, it's been such a challenge from the onboarding point of view. I think we still have it in us to do it manually again if it had to go away.
Fair. Well, I think that concludes our time here together. Please join me in thanking the panelists for all their contributions.